first of all, give your impression of how you see the American media presenting this crisis in Lebanon and with the Palestinian Authority. What sort of things jump out at you?
Well, I mean, obviously the most obvious thing that jumps out at me as someone who has lived in Lebanon, lived through the siege of Beirut in 1982, and understands and has a sense of war is the way the U.S. media is presenting this as the New York Times consistently presents it, as a cross-border exchange, as somehow a war, whereas in fact what you have is essentially an Israeli assault on pretty much a defenseless country, an assault that has pulverized the infrastructure, the civilian infrastructure of Lebanon, and far more important, has devastated hundreds and hundreds of people's lives.
Now tell us a little bit about the internal politics in Lebanon, starting from the assassination of Hariri, how they have evolved up to this point, and what impact they have or relevance they have to what we're seeing unfold now.
Well, what you're seeing unfolding now is basically has very little to do with Lebanese internal politics and much more to do with Israeli politics and the Americans, the unconditional U.S. support for Israeli hegemony. And so basically, if you look at the situation in Palestine as well as the situation in Lebanon today, what we see now is an Israeli attempt to impose itself overwhelmingly without any regard for the aspirations or wishes of any of its neighbors. And it is vowed to crush any form of resistance to its hegemony, and the United States has given Israel a green light to do this. And so, not surprisingly, the two weakest peoples in the Arab world, in other words, the Palestinians and the Lebanese, are the ones who are bearing the brunt of Israeli violence and Israeli sort of war crimes. Precisely because there is no Lebanese state to surrender to Israel, and there is no Palestinian state to surrender to Israel.
Just describe a little bit about what your understanding about is happening in Lebanon in reaction to all this.
Well, I think, again, speaking to people in Lebanon, it's very clear. I mean, whatever dissatisfaction there was with Hezbollah, whatever criticisms there were, and there were many, and there are many criticisms and a lot of dissatisfaction with Hezbollah in Lebanon, is going to be dwarfed by hatred for, above all, Israel, because of what Israel is doing, this kind of indiscriminate bombing of an entire people and an entire country, and of course hatred and loathing for the United States, for the fact that the United States has openly stated that they don't mind seeing Lebanon burn for a few weeks, and that's what Condoleezza Rice and George W. Bush have said openly. They don't mind seeing Lebanon sacrificed at the altar of Israeli power. And so I think the reaction in Lebanon is going to be, at first, people of course are devastated, they're numbed, they are overwhelmed, they're concerned above all with their safety, understandably, and security. But at the same time, they are going to just sit tight because there's very little people can do except endure this Israeli massacre.
Now, do you see that there's a possibility of a war with Syria in this?
I doubt it. I think the Syrians and the Iranians, like so many other Arab states, are sort of gladly willing to fight to the last Lebanese, in the sense that they may support Hezbollah, in terms of financially and politically, but they're not going to, in any way, shape, or form, get themselves involved with a conflict with a manifestly superior military power, that is to say Israel.
From a historical point of view, how do you see this crisis in a wider context, given the fact that what's different now is not only do we have this ongoing evolution of the Arab-Israeli conflict, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but we have an attempt by the United States to re-engineer the Middle East with its presence in Iraq.
Correct, and again, the U.S. policy in Iraq is in disarray, it's a shambles, it's a failure, and the largest price will be paid, of course, by the Iraqis themselves and by the Arabs more generally. But of course the U.S. is going to fail in Iraq in terms of its policy because it has no coherent policy. In terms of the historical implications, it's very clear to me. I mean, Israel has consistently produced its own worst enemies. Israel, in effect, created Hezbollah by its invasion of Lebanon in 1982. Israel has created Hamas as a counterweight to Fatah in the 1980s, or at least acquiesced to the creation of Hamas as a counterweight to the more secular Fatah party in the Palestinian politics. And so, again, Israel now is going to produce something far worse, I think, than Hezbollah in the medium term. I say, from a historical perspective, I think the rage and the anger in the Arab street, the frustration in the Arab street is there, and I should say in the Arab world is there, and is going to continue to build. But what's clear from this particular episode is that the Arab states, almost to the last state, have basically surrendered to the U.S. The Saudis, the Jordanians, the Egyptians are firmly within the U.S. camp, and in that U.S. camp, the U.S. comes first, Israel comes second, and everyone else is below them. Hezbollah and Hamas are the only two organizations that are actively resisting, as well as the resistance in Iraq, this U.S. order for the region.
Well, what sort of insights have you gained from looking at America's interrelationship and interactions with the Arab world that shed light on what's happening now?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is that in the 19th century, the image of the United States, or America more sort of idealistically, in the 19th century was a positive one among many, many, many sectors of the educated Arab world. And then things changed dramatically in the Arab world with the advent of the State of Israel, the creation of the State of Israel, which came at the expense of the Palestinian people who were expelled from their homelands. And ever since then, the image of the United States has gone from bad to worse. And the Iraqi invasion, of course, is sort of the culmination of this trend. And what we see today is the same phase. I mean, there is no more U.S. image that's positive in the Arab world. It's an entirely negative image because of entirely negative policies, entirely, I would say, inhumane and callous policies on the part of the United States.
Well, on that note, we want to thank Ussama Makdisi,